Hey everyone, I'm Jay and welcome to another video on web dev basics. Today's video I'm going to be showing you how I build a pretty simple sliding navigation bar. So I have my basic template here on the right hand side, and you can see I have a little hamburger button. That's what we call the menu button. Apparently the three lines look like a hamburger. I kind of see it. But when you click on that, I'm doing a few things, and I'll go over each one of those one at a time. All right, so let me just click on it and show you. All right, so we click on that. Most prominently, you'll notice a menu slides in, pushes the rest of the content out of the way, which automatically scales, right? And then this button changes colors. And there's a little bit of cool transitioning going on with the text right here that I've added. You'll see the text kind of shrinks as it goes away and grows as it comes back. You could do anything in there. I'm doing something fairly simple that I personally think is cool. You may want to try something else. Right? But the main effect here is we have the navigation out of the way. And then if the user wants to navigate, they click on the button and it slides into place. You've probably seen something similar to this in many other places. A more common one is you click the button and the big navigation covers the screen. That works pretty much the same way as this one, or at least it can work the same way as this one. The difference would be I put my navigation actually right into the grid. I'm using a grid here, and when you put it over top of everything else, you could probably define it in a grid, but I would just put it outside the grid, maybe half towards as well. But it's a grid. You could put it in there, and you could define it in such a way that it's just layered on top of everything else. And that's okay too. But I put mine right in the grid, and we'll have a look at what's going on. So there are a few things going on. One, I've installed jQuery here. Okay, nice enough that CodePen allows you to do that. So I put jQuery in here. I'm only doing very basic jQuery command. So if you're unfamiliar with JavaScript or jQuery, it's okay. You can see it right here. There's 3 lines. Okay. Plus the line where we get the jQuery in the first place. So really 4 completely, that's it. So I've got some jQuery in there. I'm using jQuery to turn on and off a class name, and I'm putting that class name right on the body element itself. For super simplicity's sake, it's a global element, right? It's the body element. So I'm turning on and off a class name with the body element, and using that class name, because it's on the body, it can be used in CSS to affect any other element that's within the body because it's the parent. So I'm calling the class name Hamburger, using JavaScript to give the body that class name when I click the hamburger button. And then any element I choose within the body, I can say, hey, if the body element has the class name Hamburger, you're now going to behave this way. And then when you click that button again, it takes away the hamburger class name for the body, and things go back to the way they were without that class name. So let's have a look here. I'm going to walk through the jQuery. Okay, so jQuery, basically a JavaScript library. It is originally written with JavaScript, but they do a lot of shorthand things, and I'm using the Google API hosted library, which is pretty popular. Okay, it's a Google hosted library, which means that somebody gets to your website, you're using the jQuery library that's hosted by Google. Chances are a lot of other people, a lot of other websites that they have been to have already been using this, and so it's already cached in their browser. So hopefully that speeds things up a little bit. That's kind of the point of using hosted libraries. Whichever host is the most popular, hopefully will be the fastest. Okay? So I'm getting that script right there. If you want to locally host JavaScript, you can. You would download it, you put it on your website, and then instead of this long URL, you put your URL. That's it. That's the only difference. So I have that. I have nothing special in my JavaScript. This is not really a JavaScript class for this video. So I'm not adding like defer or anything like that. Then I have my script commands right here. So the only thing I'm really doing is this is a classic jQuery line right here. I call the jQuery, okay? And then I say, hey, when the document is ready, do this function that I'm going to do. And I have an anonymous function defined, and I'm using $, jQuery shorthand to say, find the element Hamburger. Okay, I've identified this button here as an ID of Hamburger. Okay, so it says find that element and add the click event and make it this function. So now I'm saying when the hamburger button gets clicked, what we're going to do is find the body and we're going to toggle the class hamburger. So if it has the class, we're going to take it out. If it doesn't have the class, we're going to add it. That's it. So the first line is pretty important. Wait for the document to be ready. If you don't wait for the document to be ready and you run some JavaScript and I'm in the head, okay, none of the elements exist. So this would do nothing because the body doesn't exist yet. The hamburger doesn't exist yet. This would run. It wouldn't find either of those things. Nothing would happen. So I do need to make sure that the document is ready. So this is going to wait for that. And then it's going to look for these two things and do that. All right, it's just going to add this function on a listening event. Okay, and you don't need to know how those work. jQuery kind of abstracts all that away anyway. So super simple. All I'm doing is when you click this button, I'm toggling the class hamburger right to the body. So you won't see it right here. Right? Even if I click it, you won't see it here because the left-hand side powers the right-hand side, but CodePen has some abstraction in between. So I put at my navigation here, I have a standard grid, okay? I put the hamburger button down here, gave it the ID of hamburger, made it a non-breaking space for its content, just so it has some invisible content. And then I'm using, actually I'm using an image sprite and a background color for that background image, which we'll take a look at as well. So that's the other thing that I have in this video. All right, so that's it for the HTML portion. Great, standard nav. It's an unordered list. Everything else is just kind of some dummy filler text. Right, and then there's the JavaScript. So let's have a look at the CSS. There's actually not very much going on in there as well. Not that's specific to what I'm doing. There's kind of a lot of just regular stuff going on here. I have my grid. I'm not actually manipulating the grid when you click it, okay? As you can see, I've just defined my grid and I don't have anything special with regard to the hamburger class name, okay? So I've come up with a way to do that. That's a 2-column setup. The left column is an auto width. So my nav, when it's not being displayed, its width is 0, so you can't see it. And then when my nav is being displayed, its width is whatever it's set to. And because the grid is set to auto, the grid will automatically size itself accordingly based on the width of the nav element. So really cool. I did try actually setting the columns on the grid. It didn't really work visually as well as I'd hoped. It worked, but it didn't look good. So I wanted this method instead. Okay, so the nav, we got a couple of things here. The regular nav definition here, right? When there is no hamburger button having been clicked, the nav should have no padding, no margin, and no width. Also a very small font size and a very large line height. That's going to give me this, this kind of text manipulation, size manipulation that I have going on here. Okay, that's my fancy thing. The other key setting here is overflow hidden. That's very important because if you don't set overflow hidden, what's going to happen is, let me just break that code. And then when I shrink this, the overflow, you can still see the text. Okay. All right, it doesn't quite work. And so I need to make the overflow hidden so that way when I have a width of 0, the text doesn't overflow outside of that width. Okay. And then the new thing for this video is the transition. Okay. This is a timing feature built into CSS that when any of these things happen, because I've used the keyword all, when any of these CSS properties are set or triggered for any reason, they're going to trigger with a 750 millisecond timer, and the timing function is going to be, use the keyword ease, which is just the timing function that goes along with it. Okay. So with any of these, now things with keywords like changing the overflow to hidden, if that triggers the 750 milliseconds, it's just going to happen instantly because there's no transition between things of keywords. It has to be a numeric value that changes, and then that numeric value can transition with a timing function. Okay, so I have this transition set when this triggers, and I have the same transition set when this next piece of CSS triggers. And this is, what does the nav look like when the body element has the hamburger class? And so the difference is now I do have a width that's not 0, it's 10 EM, which is important because it's going to be according to the size of the font. That's pretty good for, if I change my font size, things will still fit hopefully the same without having to change it. I could use just a pixel-based width, but if the font size changes, then the pixel-based width is going to be off a bit, right? I could set it to auto, but that's another keyword issue, and the transition doesn't quite work right. I could set the width to auto, and then because the font size changes, you'll see a little bit of a jump when the auto triggers, but then as the font size grows, you'll see it grow a little bit. And that would look kind of okay, but not quite perfect. We don't want the transition to be jumping around and be visually jarring to the user. So I'm adding the width, the padding, upgrading the font size and line height to what their proper settings should be. Okay. And that is the display of the nav. Okay. Pretty cool, right? Let's come down to, this is the hamburger button itself. So I've defined a height and width for it and gave it a background. I have an image hosted at Imgur for, actually has a lot of these sprites on here. It's a transparent image with a bunch of social media icons, and we're going to use background position to show just one at a time. All right, so we're going to use background position right here, and I have my image set so that in 50 pixel increments, that's where all the images are, and then all the images are 32 pixels by 32 pixels in size. There is some wasted space, but it's easy to work with. Right? It's human friendly. It's not a very large image to begin with. So each of the sprites is 50 pixel increments. So my background position, we start at the top left corner and we shift the image in the negative direction, 250 pixels. That's going to be the 5th image across. 150 pixels, it will be the 3rd image down. And if I have a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Actually, I think I counted wrong. I think it's going to be 1, 2, 3. it's not going to be the 5th image. I'm going to move 5 images over from the first one. So it will be the 6th, and I'm going to move 150 or pixels or 3 images down from the first one. So it will be the 4th. It's going to be this one. And then I have a background color set that's this green color. And when it gets triggered, when the body has the Hamburger class, so after I clicked it, I'm going to change the background color. I'm not going to change the border radius. That's going to stay the same. But I'm going to change the sprite to be not this one any longer, but now this one, so it matches the color there. Right, so you'll see the sprite changes from the black bars to the white bars, and the background color changes from green to pink, I guess. Okay. And I think that's everything in here. Yes. That's all of it. All right, let's have a look back at the nav. That's the cool stuff, right? We changed the width of the nav. That's a primary one. I don't have to change the font size, but I want to show you that you can change anything in order to make it look cool when it does that transition. Right? So I thought it would look cool if I shrank the text. Okay, if you don't shrink the text, let me just take this out of here. Take this out of here and run this without doing that. See, what happens is the text kind of tries to realign itself, and I just didn't like that, so I decided to shrink the text instead. And a line height of 3. I decided to make it shrink, and then by the time the readjustment does happen, it's so small I don't think the users will really notice. They'll just be like, oh cool, look, it shrunk into place. And it shrunk because I changed the line height. It shrunk a little bit more on the lines, but it kind of keeps its height, kind of. Right. So that is some interactivity using some CSS properties, the transition, and powered by this jQuery class toggling function, right, called toggle class. Right. It's pretty simple. You don't actually have to know how to use any JavaScript or jQuery. All you really need to know how to use is the HTML and CSS, and you could just copy and paste this jQuery part. Pretty simple. All right, I will have a link to this page in the comment section. On this page is already a few links to the jQuery documentation on the CSS transition and how it works, and it has a lot more features that I didn't talk about. A link to that icons image that I'm using, in case you're interested in that, and a link to where to get jQuery source links. This is the hosted libraries from Google. They host more than just jQuery, and they are not the only place to get hosted libraries. Definitely not. They're just pretty common, and so that's why I'm using them for this example. All right. So that's it. Thanks for watching.